All right, folks, welcome to another episode, great episode of Mirror Coffee Roaster warm-up sessions. It doesn't have the exact zing that when Mark does it. Mark has the zing with it. You know, he's got the voice. Everybody knows the Mark voice. But today it's not the Mark voice. It's the Sergey or Sergey, however you pronounce my name voice. I'm already going off.
How do you pronounce your name?
Dude, so many people ask that.
I know, that's why
we should
just
he code switches, bro.
There you go, dude.
Okay.
I would say Surge is the universal.
Surge.
It's
Is it?
both.
It's the best
If
of
you,
both worlds.
yeah, it's because you cut off the complications, the EI or EY complication.
Yeah, that's a good
Because
point.
it's either
Fair enough.
Sergey or Sergi, but Surge is just stop halfway.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, a little.
It's got the power to
70%.
it, too.
Yeah, it's got the power of the Surge.
Yeah, and that's why
Come on,
Max
folks.
is a dad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I got those for days.
Well, folks, we do have a guest. You can hear the guest, see the guest.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. We do have a guest on the pod. I think if you listened to the last episode, we talked about competition and we actually shouted out that Max was coming on. So this is the episode probably you've been waiting. I've been awaiting this conversation.
Same.
Anyway, one of the things we do, pour some batch. So I'm going to pour it again. Even though, you know.
We had a little technical snafu earlier, so we restarted. So
That's right.
we're repouring some,
That's right.
which is great because this coffee is delicious.
I mean, yeah, the more the better. So we actually finally might actually drink all of it. I feel so bad. We often record these podcasts and there's so much left over, and it's like, right, we'll just leave it for who
Not
knows.
today.
Yeah, not
We're
today.
going to crush this.
That's one of the funny things is folks always comment on us taking this sip on the podcast. They're like, man, y'all are never satisfied with your coffee because we jack up the grind size or do something like,
Yeah.
oh man, no, not this coffee. There was one coffee, dude, that really impressed us,
Yeah?
and that's Diego Bermudez.
Word.
So
Yeah. That
So
coffee
on
is
batch.
You just throw water at
On
that
batch.
coffee and it tastes
Yeah,
good.
It's
throw
amazing.
water.
Just throw water at it and it'll
wild.
taste good. Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This coffee is actually from Ilse.
Hilsa.
Ilse.
It's all right,
Dude,
dude.
jacked it up again as if it was part of the
Right.
script. But from Ilsa, it's the Guji Uraga. It's a coffee that both Mark and I have been super fond of because we also are roasting a Guji Uraga, and I think are they from the same producer, same farm, kind of something along those lines. They're tasting very similar, except for when we had that cupping and it was on the cupping table for the three of us. We were super impressed. We're like, dang, our coffee needs to taste this good.
Mm-hmm.
Just super tasty. And for us, all three of us agreed that Ilsa's coffees were super clear. The clarity was wild.
Yeah.
So, and same, right now on batch, I mean, it's been about 30 minutes, cooling down, and you can taste that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, this is maybe a little over extracted, but not much. Yeah.
Yeah.
It still definitely has clarity to it. Yeah.
There you go.
Max,
So
you fit right into the podcast.
Yeah,
I love
totally.
it. It's like you can't say this coffee's dialed. You have to it's just
mean,
a
it's-
hair over extracted.
It is a little. It's just a little.
There's 2.5 channels in there.
You know,
There's the English and
Oh, God. Let's go.
yeah. Anyway, the coffee is good though. Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
yeah, and that coffee's actually at Narrative.
Yeah,
And,
sure is.
Yeah, Max is the owner of Narrative.
Yeah,
That's
one of them,
another
right?
little one of them. Yeah, that's a little mumble right there.
Yeah.
So super stoked on that. We're gonna be talking about Narrative. We're gonna be talking about the fact that Narrative is opening a second location in Bellingham. So I've been super pumped about that.
Yeah.
Dude, I keep saying the same thing over and over again. The fact I'm super excited that I'm part of the team.
Dude, I am
Thank
super
you.
excited you're part
Yeah,
of the team.
so
yeah,
good.
thank you. I don't
Just-
even know what you're talking about.
Jazzed about it, man. So with that said, Max is not only a coffee professional, he's also a father of two, Evelyn and Beckett.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go. I'm doing better already. And he's also a husband. He's also moved around. We talked about this earlier, but moved around a lot.
That's true.
A lot. How many places? Were you saying?
Before I graduated high school, 24.
24 places before high school.
Yeah.
Wow.
Insane.
Yeah, it was
Insane.
a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. We kind of moved around here and there.
You moved around more than I did.
I mean, you guys definitely came farther than I did.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Sergi moved from the other side of the
Soviet
world.
Union. Yeah. Not Russia, folks. The Soviet Union.
That's right.
It's a big difference, man. Little history
I believe
lesson.
you.
I'm going to keep that out, but we'll move forward.
All right. Deal.
No, we moved around also within Washington a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So it's been fun. It's fun. Moving, it's not my thing.
Me either.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
Don't.
yeah, that's why I've really chosen to plant myself where I'm at.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, where do we go? Let's pick up from the last episode. The last episode, we talked about competition.
Yeah.
And we talked about just what it can look like as like healthy competition, toxic competition, and how competition can be in general beneficial for the coffee industry, whether that's like for the guests that we're serving and or just within like baristas, like the challenge, the aspect of where you want to get better at your craft and you want to actually serve customers or guests better.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the beauty of competition. Like personally, like you and I have talked a lot about that, and the fact like I want to compete because I want to be challenged, but I also like want to grow in my craft. Like I love challenges, but I love them when I know I can overcome them. Like,
Totally.
No one
Yeah.
likes to be stuck, but and it's also awesome to be like part of a team that fosters that, because you yourself are a competitor.
Yeah.
You've competed quite a bit. You were sharing some stories earlier.
Yeah.
So if you want to just give us a little recap of your competition history.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it starts within my first 3 weeks of being a professional barista. So I started at home, just reading coffee forums back in like 2012, back when there wasn't nearly as much information as readily accessible as it is now. But I kind of started back when I was just doing that just as a hobby. And I needed to get a second job. I was working part-time and I just needed a little extra income. And I was like, you know what? I should just work in coffee. And so I went and got a job working for Cafe Ladro in January of 2013. And the manager who hired me, she's really great. Her name's Sarah, but she was calling to let me know that they had like an in-house barista competition coming up to represent Cafe Ladro for the Northwest regional barista competition. And she's like, I think you would probably like it because you're, like a coffee nerd or whatever. And I think you'd probably like it. And I was like, yeah, I would like it. Actually, can I compete in that? Like, that sounds awesome. Yeah. And she was like, let me double check, but probably. And so they let me compete. And so I actually practiced at Visions Espresso Service, which is a like wholesaler. They also sell directly to the public down in Seattle. And Cole McBride was running a lot of sales stuff there. And I had like met him on the internet doing like latte art and stuff. And I was like, hey, can I come practice on your equipment? There's this in-house thing coming up. So he let me. And so he was there and helping out with stuff. And it was really cool. So the first time I ever touched commercial equipment was at Visions, which was really fun in preparation for this in-house barista competition. Really cool. And so I went and did it. And I ended up getting selected as one of the three kind of people. There was two ahead of me, Ryan Beeson, who worked for me for a little while, and Michael Ryan, who owns a consulting company now, worked for Dapper & Wise for a long time and stuff. And then Sam Spillman, who's one of our U.S. Barista champions, was selected to do Brewers Cup from that same in-house competition. Dang. That was a fun moment. And
wait, so all of y'all work together?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, at Ladro at the same
That's
time.
wild.
That was with Layla too.
Okay.
So Layla was like the coffee educator at Ladro at the time. So she was one of the ones selecting. And Tarek Arak, who's another competition. She's been a judge for years. Yeah. Has been around the latte art scene for a while. She manages Cafe Vita's KEXP cafe now. So yeah, we were all there at the same time. A lot of like Seattle coffee veterans were all kind of there at the same time. It was really fun. So yeah, I got started then, did Northwest Regional Barista Competition. Then it transitioned into like Big West. So I did that for a couple of years. I kind of moved over to Spotted Cow where I was working, sourcing coffee for them, and just competed and just have continued to compete up until I think 2018 or 2019 was the last year that I did barista, just because I needed to make room for some of our staff. So, so just kind of coached and did that for a little bit, and then the pandemic hit. But yeah, I've been basically competing since 2013. Yeah.
Wow, dude, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't connect the dots. I knew you competed a lot, but that's a long time frame.
Yeah.
Are you just then naturally a competitive person?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah.
Competition runs in my family, especially. Game nights get pretty intense.
Yeah, that's dope.
So, yeah. Hopefully always positive, but yeah.
That's not any news for us.
Yeah, we're
as
Monopoly.
well. Yeah, it's
Deal.
like if you put us, especially the brothers, on around a Monopoly game, dude, it's over. It's like you need like an external monitor that's like not playing in the game.
Yeah,
It's just like
just a referee.
just a referee.
Just an umpire calling shots. Like, you're out of here.
Secret trades going on, all that above.
Backdoor deals.
Dude, I'll literally give you $5.
Nice. Very good. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, that makes like competition, I would say, like a little easier if that's like the very nature of like you want to do
it
this.
Certainly does. Yeah. So I've always had like a desire to grow and see myself like understand where I sit in the world. And there are a few opportunities to do that are better suited than like a competition. Yeah. Also, I just think that it's really fun. It's kind of a unique moment, and especially in the work, like the rhythm of a working barista, where you get to just focus in. Like usually the bulk of your like coffee education and coffee training when you're a barista comes at the very beginning, and then kind of there's not usually set aside time for continued education and those sorts of things. Depending on the company you work for, maybe your company cares a lot about that and that sort of stuff, but that's not the normal. And I always found as a working barista that it was really nice to have like a rhythm to be able to set aside yearly of like, this is the time I'm going to devote to understanding this product. And really putting everything I got into this and, kind of seeing where it goes. And just the amount of innovation that we've seen come from the competition circuit is unbelievable. So I firmly believe that competition almost always leads to innovation and improvements. It certainly can become toxic. And I'm sure you guys spend plenty of time talking about that. And it definitely can be. There's like a sort of, especially within the coffee industry, there's a sort of like hierarchy of importance, and competition sits pretty high up there, and it probably doesn't deserve the like penultimate spot. It's like, it is a powerful and important thing, but it's not the only way to vet or show your mettle as a barista. It's just a way. It happens to be a really rigorous and structured one, which is really helpful, but but it's nice. I think of competition. There's a Pips Donuts in Portland. They have a really famous phrase that's become like kind of almost the norm in conversation these days, but it's a community over competition. And I really like that. I love the spirit of that. I would kind of change mine just a little bit to say the community in competition, because I have found so much community inside the group of people that end up competing and doing things. And I've just met so many amazing people, and so it's just been really cool. I think barista competitions are really fun in the sense that when I approach them, I don't think of myself as competing against other people. I just see it as a way of competing against myself, and having a real opportunity to get actual substantive feedback and that sort of thing. So anyway,
I agree. I think even like I haven't competed on those levels, but even like latte art throwdowns, like going to latte art throwdowns and meeting new people in the industry and like creating friendships from that, and then meeting different cafe owners, and it just develops like a network of people and also like a community of like friends. Yeah. So I mean, personally, I've really enjoyed that. Like I've loved that part of competition, but also I agree, like it challenges you kind of step up to the game, like in a different way than like day-to-day work in the cafe. Yeah. So from all of that, like you started competing very, very early in your coffee career, and you started working for different cafes, and then at some point, where does you starting your own cafe come in the picture?
So funny enough, it actually starts before I started working in cafes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The name for Narrative and even like our Facebook page has been in existence since before I started working for cafes, because I made a joke about this earlier before we were on the mic, but I was one of those people who started with a popcorn popper and then started roasting coffee, and then people were like, I want to buy your coffee because they're friends or whatever, and then I was like, well, I should make a name for it, and decided I was going to start a roasting company or whatever off of a 50 gram at a time popcorn popper, which is a terrible idea. Don't do do that. But I did. And so I kind of picked out a name for it. And then once I started working in coffee, I worked for a company that was called Spotted Cow. That's now called Visible Coffee Roasters. It's been gone through a few owner changes and that sort of thing. But I started working there after Lodro for a little bit. And I just really realized that I love retail coffee and serving guests in a cafe setting a lot more than like roasting. Roasting is a very technical craft that takes a lot of like self-reflection, a lot of careful, detailed understanding, and you also have to be okay with like not talking to people for a while. And like I am just not that person. Like I just need to talk to people, which has made owning a cafe actually a little more difficult because I've spent way more time behind a desk than I would like to. But anyway, I realized just how much like I loved retail, and so when I was working at Spotted Cow, I had kind of running into some structural challenges as a father and a husband, just in terms of my overall earning potential. And the team that we had at the company at the time was really amazing. So there weren't really any openings that were going to kind of be giving me opportunities to grow. Yeah. And we were looking at possibly expanding with the intention of being able to like create more positions to where, you know, I could fill in some of those and, you know, advance my career and that sort of thing. And it just didn't, the timing just didn't work out for that. And the owners decided that they didn't want to pursue expansion and that sort of thing. And so I took the expansion proposal that I had put together for Spotted Cow. I had recommended Everett as a place to do that. I really believed in the city and everything that was going on there, and converted that expansion proposal into a business plan that I then put Narrative's name on and like turned it into what it is now. So,
Which you just talked a little bit about, like that you just like love to talk, and how that like opening a cafe model was more kind of fit more closer with who you are as a person, which kind of just leads me to think about like I think a lot of your personal values as a business owner, I think naturally just pour into the business's values, or in this case, Narrative's values. What do you think are some of the core like values that you've instilled into Narrative, or you want to drive Narrative by? And what are some experiences that have built that up? Like,
man, that's a great question. I think that that's super true. I think that a lot of times as leaders, you end up making little images of yourself all throughout your, like any group that you're leading or anything like that. Some of that's like just by the nature of things, but some of it's just the way that it happens. And those happen either through intention or with non-intention. So I'll share positive intention things that have shown up in Narrative, and also maybe an unintentioned negative that has shown up. But the big ones for me are, we have 4 main values, and those drive everything that we do. Those were very obviously intentionally chosen. Hospitality is paramount is number 1. Quality offered humbly is number 2. Making room for everyone is number 3. And creating community is number 4. And they're roughly in hierarchical order. So like they not only are they values in the sense that like we want people to embody these in terms of how they interact with guests and those sorts of things, but they're also decision-making rubrics. Oh, nice. So the idea is that like any leader, any business owner, even any just person in general is going to run into more opportunities than they can say yes to in a feasible way. And I find particularly in business or even just anything in life, having a mechanism to decide what to say no to is really important, because it helps you say yes to the things that matter the most. Because what can happen a lot of times is your time will get eaten up with things that aren't maybe essential. And then when opportunities to do what is essential comes up, your time is now spread too thin and you don't have the bandwidth to do that. So part of the crafting of these 4 values was also in being able to pick values that made sense to empower our staff to make decisions on the floor and in any side of the business that they're in. So for baristas, that looks like, you know, ultimately do what creates the most hospitable situation for our guests. You know, and like quality is right up there with hospitality, but ultimately at the end of the day, hospitality wins out a little bit for us. You know, and there are some people who, this was probably more common back in like the mid 2000 or aughts, teens, I guess. like 2014 to 2016 or 17 or so. But there was a pretty solid trend there for a while of like no syrups, no additions, no nothing added to our coffee. This should be only as it is, right? And to me, like that creates an environment where it doesn't offer the most hospitality for people, and it doesn't create an opportunity for my staff to be winsome and helping invite people into the community of coffee. And so, like, you know, we made specific choices around that. Obviously, quality is super important to us, and we spend a lot of effort, you know, as you guys have now experienced a little bit of what our cupping process is like. You know, we spend a lot of effort going through all of this to make sure that our quality remains really high. And then we have a system for continually evaluating quality, because quality is one of those things where it necessarily will diminish if there are not intention kept in inputs into the system the entire time. It will diminish just by the nature of how it works. Kyle Glanville once said that you can only detract from quality of coffee. You can't add quality to it. And I think that's really real. Yeah. So, anyway, so those 4 values, I think those ultimately are driven also out of who I am. You know, hospitality is really important to me. A thing I share frequently within our company is just that the root word for hospitality is a Latin word called hostis, and it meant stranger or enemy. And so, it's the same root word that's used in hosting someone, or also a hospital or a hotel, or to be hostile to someone, to act in capacity as an enemy towards somebody. Interesting. So it's the same word that kind of feeds all of these words that show up in English language. But the art of hospitality is the art of transforming a stranger or an enemy into a friend. And that is just like so central to who I am because of all the moving experiences that I've had, and all of the challenges that I've had, and all the different places I've lived. I've had maybe a set of experiences. Human beings are always the sum of their experiences, right? Like you are always the total of every experience you've ever had. That is who you are. And not a lot of people have had the same set of experiences that I have, and haven't connected with all the same types of people that I have. And so I'm often known for being like kind of a caught in the center kind of person. I try to think of it as bridge building, but some people would call me like lukewarm. But it's partly because I've just met so many people throughout the years with so many different perspectives, that it's really helped me gain an understanding for how people work a lot of times, regardless of maybe their perspectives about the world or their opinions on any given sort of thing. And in particularly polarized times, like the last couple of years that we've had, that really shows up for me in ways that is sometimes uncomfortable. But it's also, it really reflects my values in the sense of hospitality, and that I want everyone to be welcomed in our spaces and be treated thoughtfully and carefully, and with respect, you know? So I think that's very much part of who I am. You know, and just to be abundantly clear, Narrative is owned by 2 people, myself and Richard Orr. And I am a Christian. And so like my values in that particular way, particularly from hospitality, stem from that worldview, but Richard's not necessarily. I actually don't know where he lands on matters of faith, but Narrative is not a Christian business or anything like that. But that is definitely a thing that has been influenced by that aspect of my life that I see clearly showing up in the business. There's not really a way around it. So it just is what it is. So, and then, you know, the quality component of things. Again, one of my values is just excellence, and trying to do anything that I'm going to do, any work that I'm going to do, I want to do it to the best of my ability. Especially with something meaningful, right? Like I'm okay with letting some things fly. You know, I don't have to have the very best toilet paper in the world or something like that.
Wait,
you know?
Max, you don't?
No, I know. Isn't that crazy? Dude, some people, you know, I was sharing with a friend that I like Mountain Dew, and they were like, "You like Mountain Dew? Are you crazy?" And they're like, "I expected a person of your palate to like not like that." I was like, "Whoa, hold off!" Like, first off, I've been drinking Mountain Dew since I was a kid because my mom loved it. But second off, like it doesn't matter to me. Like I'm not making Mountain Dew for a living, you know? So like, I don't have to have that. Like, you know, I grew up eating Spam and like Vienna sausages, which are objectively bad, but I like them. You know, and it's like, they are not the best version of meat possible, but it's again, that doesn't have to be done with excellence in my life, but the things that I do and I orient my life around, I want to be done with excellence. You know, and so that quality component, but with humility, right? Like that's, again, influenced by my experiences in the world, and just the people that I've connected with over time have shown me that, you know, a lot of times when people get haughty or like proud, it's sometimes rooted in an oppositional sense of like, I'm better than that person.
Yeah.
Right. It's like almost always other centered.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, humility is about knowing where you stand in the world. You know, even if you are very good at what you do, you know, it's like, and I think like I've been to a lot of cafes and I feel pretty confident that Narrative is doing a very good job in the overall spectrum of things, but it's like, that is in no way reflective of how we relate to other companies, just how we relate to ourselves and what we're doing.
Yep.
So, you know, like that humility component is really important to me, and like not making people feel bad if they come in and they don't know what some special, like if someone comes in and is like, well, can I get a caramel macchiato or something like that? Yeah, totally. I got you. Yeah, no problem. I will make you something that's like that. You know, I'll explain it. I'm not going to educate you and like force you to think about this the same way that I do. Like, I know what you mean. I know what you meant. Like, I can understand what you're saying. Like, no problem. I can make that for you, you know? And so a lot of people just, they're like, no, it's this way. You mean a macchiato is this big, you know? And it's just like kind of pretentious and makes them feel bad for not knowing some secret language that you have. You know, which is why like our menu just says espresso and milk. It doesn't say latte or macchiato or cappuccino or any of those kinds of things. It's like, I don't expect you to know Italian to be able to come in here and order a drink, you know? So that's where that humility kind of comes in there. So
that's good.
And then again, the making room at our table for everyone, like just again, all that, my background and my history of like just how many experiences I've had has led me to know that like the world does not work in the same way that my experience would make. Like many people think that their experience is the universal for how the world works. Particularly people who look like me. That's a pretty common thing that happens, right? But it's like, that's not the only experience in the world. There are plenty of other experiences out there. And like having met a number of people over the years, it's like, oh, okay, like maybe the world doesn't work exclusively the way that I've experienced it. So, you know, like that value is very much driven from like, I've learned that other people who have different perspectives, experiences, they bring so much value and life and just insight to your world. So, and then creating community obviously is something that's really important to me. But I want to get to the negative things because there are a couple of things that are a reflection of my personality that have shown up in a negative way in the company. That happens too. And one of the big ones is just that like Sergi will know this from having sat in a number of meetings now, but it's just like communication, remembering to communicate is usually one of my biggest things that I forget to do because I just have so much little stuff going on in my brain that I like forget to explain that to other people. And so like, that's just a natural like thing that I naturally just forget to do. I'm generally a little bit forgetful. Like I'm not one of those, like I'm more of a vision oriented person, not like a nitty gritty details oriented kind of person. And so like, I forget to do small things a lot. Like Sergi knows this too. I like misplace stuff frequently and like, I'll just like not know where stuff is sometimes. So like, if it doesn't have a rigid system that's always that way, I will totally forget it. And so that's very much been like a lot of our effort and that's our big focus for this year is improving those kinds of systems. So that way those things don't get missed because that's just who I am. Right. And like that is not a moral judgment on me. Right. Like I don't feel like I'm a bad person for having that, but it is something that will manifest itself in a negative way in the company long-term if it doesn't get addressed. And so that looks like building systems and having people around me who are better at those kinds of things than I am to help fill those gaps in. You know, and so it's just like that will happen for any organization, any person, any leadership experience that happens, right? And you have a couple of options. You can get defensive and frustrated about it and like take it personally, or you can just say, you know what, like this is doesn't say anything bad about who I am, but this will create problems and we should fix those. So that's a thing that like is part of who I am. That's maybe not ideal for owning a business, but is also like real talk, just the way it goes sometimes, you know? So yeah, it happens.
Sure. I think over how long have we been working together? Like 4 months?
4 months. Yeah.
I think one of the things like over the last 4 months I've noticed is you personally a very intentional person, which makes Narrative a intentional place. So how did this model of just being a multi-roaster one, but also how you choose coffees, because that plays a role in hospitality, that plays a little role in like inclusion, community, and quality. How did that model come together?
Yeah, so I guess I'll explain how we source coffees, just that way people know. So the way that we source coffees is a little bit different than most multi-roasters or any roaster or coffee shop, generally speaking. But we have a competition, actually. It's basically a competitive cycle every 2 months where roasters will send us samples, and then we go through and anonymize those samples, and then we grade them and cup them. Cupping, if you're unfamiliar, is a process where you add coffee and water together only in a cup, and then you knock down the grounds to the bottom of it, and then you drink that. So there's no filtration at all. It's just coffee and water. It helps give you the most maybe accurate sort of representation, ideally, and the most accurate representation of what a coffee is going to be. So we do that, and then there's different ways that people taste coffee. If you've been around the industry for a while, you'll be familiar with like the Q grading process and all of that. That's around like coffee grading in terms of like that is specifically to help set prices for coffees and help find defects, like major defects that negatively impact the flavor of coffee. But they're not like flavor profile oriented really. Like they're just meant to describe the quality of a coffee, not like whether you necessarily would like a coffee or not, right? Like you can have a high scoring coffee that's a little more like herbal and vegetal, and you can have a high scoring coffee that's more like fruity and jammy, and like those can score the same thing. They can come out with the same score. So I sort of built a 10 category cupping form that is my best attempt at getting close to what I want to buy coffees for our guests. It kind of helps bring those qualities forward. So did that, put it on a 0 to 10 scale for each category, so 100 points total. And in the specialty, or in the like Q grading cupping protocol, like 80 is the specialty floor, so anything above an 80 is a specialty coffee. The functional range is between 80 and like 92 to 94. It's like you don't normally see coffees beyond that range on like an official Q graders cupping scale. So I just basically took that usable, workable scale and tried to put it on a 10-point. Like actually 10 points. Yeah. So anything that's not specialty just doesn't get graded. It's just a 0. And then, like the best coffees I've ever had, I think I scored it like a 91 maybe, so it comes into a similar place. I'm still trying to leave a little room at the theoretical top because I have had my mind blown still after working in coffee all these years. I've had coffees that blew my mind. And I'm like, I've never tasted anything like this. So anyway, I built this scale for it. So roasters send us in samples, we anonymize them, grade them on that scale. We go through and cup them, and then select. Basically, what it does is each coffee the roaster sends in, they send between 3 and 5. So each coffee gets its score. The roaster's score gets averaged out of those scores, with the lowest score being dropped if they send 4 or 5 coffees. And then we work with the 2 highest scoring roasters for that 2-month period of time. And I came up with that idea for a couple of reasons. Number one is back to the values that we have of quality being offered humbly. Yeah. Quality is, in coffee, it is 100% about taste, period, right? Like defects are because they are negative taste attributes. And there's a little bit of a problem in coffee, and this is just not even just in coffee, it's like human psyche in general, but where branding and like the sort of things that are tertiary to quality and taste can influence decision making past the actual taste. Yeah. And so that is a problem that I'm interested in addressing. And I'm a human being just like everybody else, and my eyes deceive me as well. It's like anytime I see those like 3D illusions, like I fall prey to those too. I'm not some superhuman. And so my doing it this way is built as a way to help avoid my own internal biases against maybe bad packaging or stuff like that, because I want to create the best experience for guests possible. Yeah. I also, as a coffee company that does not roast, it is really common for retail coffee companies to be known by the roaster that they serve and have their brand directly affected by the roaster that they serve and not by the coffee company itself. So, like a coffee bar opens and they serve, I don't know, pick a roaster that's common, like Stumptown or
Yeah.
Intelligentsia, or like, oh, that's a counterculture account or whatever, right? And you literally think about it by the roaster that they serve, not the cafe itself.
Yeah.
And I was really interested, like, roasting is something that like I'm not unopposed to doing. It's in our business plan of eventually doing. But it's ultimately not like, it is not essential to what I'm wanting to do right now, which is introducing, like, I started this way because I wanted to introduce Everett to specialty coffee. And I felt like this was the best way to do that, having this multi-roaster model, because I could show people in Everett that like there are a lot of places that are doing coffee like this. They just haven't had it yet. And so it was sort of positioned as a way to introduce specialty coffee to Everett in a quality forward way. And then without branding, like impacting things too much. And also so that way when we were building our brand, it was around Narrative's brand and not directly attached to somebody else's brand, which is no shade to anybody else's brands. It's just, I don't want my brand equity attached to some other brand. I've seen it so many times where like a coffee company will be serving some roaster and then all of a sudden like that roaster has some like serious ethical problems or something. And then it like tanks that whole company, and like, I'm just not interested in doing that. I'm interested in like my customers knowing that they can trust us. Right. And if our roaster that we're working with, if their quality dips, like I need to have a fair mechanism for treating them fairly. Yeah. Right. And so like sometimes systems are the best way to enforce fairness. Yeah. And so like that's part of my hope with this, is that every 2 months it gets reevaluated, right? Because again, quality is one of those things that will dip if it's not given consistent input. So if you're not consistently QCing, if you're not consistently quality controlling, if you're not consistently like reevaluating where things are at, it will eventually just kind of get lost a little bit. So having a rigid kind of consistent system was my way of saying like, okay, like we're going to make sure that we consistently have the best available product to work with at any given point in time. Right. So that's kind of why we landed there. The other component is that I have a lot of friends in the industry. And when you have a lot of friends, being honest with people is really tough when you're friends with them and what they're doing is not great. And it can hurt feelings. And even within this system, it can still hurt feelings. But I also think that like genuine, honest feedback is so much more helpful to people than kind of veiled things to protect how they feel about a given thing, right? Because the reality is, and you guys would know this, the reality is this is people's entire lives go into roasting company. Like this is not just something that people do for fun for the most part. Like most people, they've invested their everything into this. This is like they're giving this everything they've got. And to hear that is not as good as somebody else giving it everything that they've got can hurt bad. Like that can hurt so bad. And I care about people and I'm not out to hurt anybody's feelings. But the reality is that for a lot of folks, if I it would be uncomfortable to do that outside of this environment where everybody's getting handled and treated the same exact way.
I think your value actually, before you went on that little rant, I think your value of like community and serving people, as much as it does hurt, to receive some kind of feedback that maybe me feel uncomfortable, I think there's like a unique and special bond that actually grows out of like really genuine and authentic conversation and feedback, even though, two people may not agree. And it's not the difference of like your coffee sucks and this person doesn't. It's more like sometimes it's, and we've talked about this before, sometimes it's like, you think it's great. My preference just isn't there with it. And to be able to have those conversations, I think actually fosters like a very unique and incredible relationships. Where, especially with someone like you who has, relationships across the industry everywhere, I think there's something beautiful there that actually, I think actually even more instills that value of community even more so that I love, so
I think
glad to hear that.
For sure.
For us, even just as Mirror, like we've submitted coffees a couple of times, and I think this last time we submitted, like I think it changed something for me because of how like you and I have worked together. I got to know you, we got to know each other, and understanding like the culture of Narrative, like submitting coffees this time around, I felt like safe. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it wasn't about like, oh, quote unquote, like being chosen or not.
Yeah,
It
totally.
was more or less like, man, like I feel safe in this environment where I can present my coffees, present like myself and my work
Yeah.
where I'm at, be able to know that I will be received equally,
Yeah.
but then also know that, man, we're going to receive some feedback that we, at the end of the day, again, trust.
Yeah.
So it really creates this atmosphere. Like, I think in general, like what I've loved at narrative is the fact like there's this atmosphere, or what I wanted to ask you is like culture. Like
Yeah.
there's this culture of like one inclusion, but also like that humility aspect. Like when you go up to order at narrative, like the wild and tame even parameters on the menu, like give you options, and they allow you to choose safely. Like, you know, like, hey, you can have a good tasty coffee and it won't like gross you out, because there's some like crazy wild coffees that are still good, but for some folks it's
Totally.
just like, that's not coffee, that's not what I wanted, or
Yep.
that's not. And sometimes within specialty coffee, like when those like crazy coffees are being served, they sometimes don't create a safe atmosphere. But narrative has fostered that. You've like fostered a safe atmosphere with high end quality. And I think
Thanks.
within that whole aspect, like that, one of my questions for you is like, dude, like, how do you define culture? Because we talk about that a lot, right? Like
Yeah.
we throw that around, like, oh man, like this place is great culture, it's toxic culture,
Yeah,
this
totally.
and that. But there's like sort of this vagueness around like, what
Yeah.
does it mean?
You know, I don't know if I can give you a straight answer on that either. You know, I'm sure a sociologist would be better suited for that particular task.
Yeah.
But to me, it's the outward expression of internal attributes of a given environment, right? So like it expresses itself in traditions, in systems, in processes, in conversation, in language, in like the ambience, in the like just the interpersonal relationships. Like culture is interwoven into all of those things because it's like an expression of those kind of like internal realities around a given place, right? It's
Yeah.
really complicated, but it's like when you think of cultures broadly, like different cultures, right? Like think of like American culture, you know, it's very much driven by like competition and like innovation, and like a lot of that's driven based on the systems that we have, just like the economic systems and the like the political systems. Like everything in the United States is oriented around like competing because you know, it's like started from this value of like competition brings value, right? Like it allows value to rise to the top if all is done well, right?
Yeah.
And so like it's sort of the outward expression of all of these characteristics, right? Like the way that we speak to each other, the kind of environments and those sorts of things. So I think it's just like it's not just feeling, but it definitely feeling is involved in it. But culture is just, it's complicated.
It is,
I don't
yeah.
have a clear answer for you, unfortunately,
Yeah.
but I think it's just reflected in so many aspects of a given thing. And it's one of those things when you know it when you see it and you don't when you don't, you know?
Yeah.
So
And I think that's why it's one of those words that we use a lot, is
Yeah.
because once we feel it and once we experience like, oh, good culture, the word comes out naturally. It's
Yeah.
like, oh man, that's what what you're talking about. You can't
Totally.
like, in a sense, kind of define it by this like formulaic, like systematic way, but it's almost like a living organism
It
between
is.
multiple organisms,
Absolutely.
like people. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
yeah,
So-
I definitely think that it is an organism. Like, you know, it culture, like bacterial culture, self-replicates, right?
Yeah.
Like, and if you have healthy, good culture, that tends to create more healthy, good culture. But if you
Yeah.
have unhealthy, negative culture, it tends to beget more negative, unhealthy culture, you know? So it definitely has that sort of organic feel to it, because it is functionally the outward expression of a bunch of organic beings just kind of living
sure.
together, you know?
Yeah.
So
You know, you mentioned something way earlier that I've been thinking about that when you were talking about the negative aspect of narrative or yourself that seeps into narrative, which I was like, I think that what ties into a little bit of like culture is that like the hard thing I think with running a business is that a lot of those like what you said, that this negative attribute may not be bad right now, but it'll soon seep into the business and will be harmful in the future. And the difficult part, I think, is that as a business owner or in leadership or in those places of our society, that a lot of those things get really quickly exposed because well, you're put under pressure, whether that's like making sure your business survives or you have to lead, your staff members or whatever it is. It just gets really difficult. And so when you're in those pressing moments, a lot of times those things like start to seep out.
Totally.
And having humility is a huge part of that.
Definitely.
And being able to just apologize and in the scope of like this culture conversation to be able to say, hey, sure, this wasn't right. How can we adjust?
Yeah.
Instead of like, just sweeping it under the rug.
Totally.
And yeah, sometimes like those things are what build culture, but it also has to do with a lot of many things. It's not just that one thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and so much of that is attached to like pride and ego, and it just like, it hurts when you receive feedback that's not always positive.
Yeah.
And leaders, there's sort of there's a few different kind of personality types that end up doing leadership-y kind of things, but like narcissists frequently end up in leadership positions because like the aspects of leadership are often attracted to them. But at the end of the day, like that unfortunately has led to a lot of negative outcomes in places because people just can't, they can't take that. It just feels like direct attack a lot of times. And, it's like, I don't know. For me, I don't think of humility. Like there's a lot of people out trying to define humility, and like there's a few different ways you can do it. There's a really common one from an author named C.S. Lewis where it's like, it's not thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking of yourself less. Actually, I don't know if I vibe with that one quite as much. To me, real humility, like when I look at people and I'm like, that person is humble. The thing that characterizes all of those people is that they just know their place in the world. They know where they sit. They know what they're good at and what they're not good at. They don't have an overinflated view of it, either positively or negatively, right? Because I know so many people who view themselves more negatively than they ought to as well, and that has its own sort of like pride attachment. For sure. And so it's just like when you do know where you sit in the world, you know that when you have like negatives and that those things need to get worked on, and for me, it's like, if I'm going to offer feedback to people in a real substantive way regularly, I had better be willing to deal with my own negative feedback when it's provided in a substantive way, So it's just like, and it helps me, right? Like one of my goals for the cupping system that I have created is not only just that it's like helps me, but it also should help other people. And like, that's why, if anyone is listening to this has ever sent me coffee and they felt a little discouraged, I would encourage, and they just didn't want to send coffees again until they felt really excited about their menu. I would encourage you not to think of it as a competition to be won or lost, but as a tracking tool to help track your progress.
Yeah. We've talked about this.
Yeah, cool.
Like
great.
This last cupping for us, I think, was like, hey, we're not even trying to, win necessarily or anything. We win, we lose, great. But it's the feedback that we're like, we just want a good blind feedback and send it in there.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, that's like my hope is that people can use that as a tool to just, like track and see, like, are the changes that you're making having the impact for people who aren't coming to it with all the big things in the back of your mind, right? Like we come to experiences very differently, right?
Yes.
And like I am tasting that for the very first time. I don't know where that coffee is. I have no idea how long it's been sitting in your warehouse. Well, I mean, sometimes I do. It's like sometimes I'm like, that coffee is very old and super baggy. Totally. But it's like, but I don't have all that history. I'm just trying to give you at least my experience and my perspective and out of my preferences, right?
For sure.
And sometimes I'll give you an objective, like this has this quality to it. I'm positive this was an actual defect, like there are some times when I've gotten phenolic defects and those sorts of things and we'll call them out. And and just to like let people know, like, yo, like this had a severe medicinal problem and has a very severe processing issue that you really should keep an eye out. So, but the hope is that it's like a useful feedback thing. And like like getting that feedback is kind of difficult. And a lot of times you have to pay somebody to give you that feedback, you know, and it's like, in theory, you are paying me, like or you're not paying me, but it's still costing you something to send me coffee.
Yeah.
Right. And especially the roasters that want to send like the full packaging with all the like, you know, they send this out to all the prospective accounts and it's like this gorgeous box with all these gorgeous bags in it.
Of course.
That does not matter to me. Literally, do not send that. Like, put your coffee in a small Ziploc bag, send it in the cheapest way possible. Give me 25 grams of each coffee and I am a happy man, right? Because that's how my system works. You know, it's like, I don't need your fancy package. Just spend as little money as possible to get me that coffee, please. You know, because it's like, otherwise it's going to just get spread out to our staff or like donating to the local homeless shelter, you know, and it's like, those are good things, of course, but like ultimately, you know, just get it to me for as cheaply as you can and, you know, go from there. So
For sure.
anyway,
yeah, that's one, like the cupping protocol and just how you choose coffees is what I see and what I hear you saying. It's like, it's one way you've implemented, in a sense, like a mirror to see your blind spot. You want it to be objective to as much as you can get to being objective when you're choosing your coffee, yet allowing your subjective preference to play a role. I think in general, understanding, like being self-aware that we all have blind spots. Therefore, like what we produce, like our businesses, like are going to have blind spots.
Of course.
So, what are some, like, I think that's one, but maybe more on like a relational level or even like a system that you've implemented that allows you to be have that mirror to see that blind spot.
So what are some systems?
Yeah, what are some?
Yeah, I think right now maybe some of the ones that we're dealing with, like going through as a whole company, is like just the like communication systems through the company. So you know, like we're currently implementing like more regular structured meetings and things that like have sort of been like on a case by case as needed basis, but haven't created like a rhythm and like a routine around those things that help create space and safety for people, right? Because like that's one of the things that we've been working on really hard as a whole company, is like having regular like staff meetings and doing that regularly, and then having like one-on-ones and all sorts of things. And these aren't new. Like we're not doing this. We're not the first people to do this or anything like that, but they're just things that we haven't really implemented yet. You know, just because there's a lot of stuff to deal with as a business owner and as leaders, and like, you know, you're trying to juggle 90 billion different things, and you're every different revenue stream and like marketing and HR and, you know, business management and taxes. And like, there's just so much stuff to keep track of, you know, and anything that doesn't have a system will fall through the cracks. And one of our managers, Alex, he's been reading a book called Atomic Habits. And he has a quote that he shared with us a couple of times that he shared today, actually, in our manager meeting. But he said, you don't rise to your goals, but you fall to your systems. And I think it's maybe some of both, right? Like but I haven't read the context of that, but I do think that as a phrase is powerful, right? Because your systems ultimately are a catch tool. Like they're the parachute, they're the bungee jump, like the bungee cords that help, you know, keep you anchored. And the cupping system is one of those that's like been a regular for us. So like having these regular meetings, having one-on-ones, having like a system of communication that's like being communicated through universally, like everybody knows that this is happening, and then we're having follow through on it and those sorts of things, is like been a big effort. And that's just, again, one of those things where like I'm really open. Like you can ask me any question. Like if you ask me how much, like if any of our staff ask me how much is in our bank account today, I will tell them. I just do not remember to communicate those kinds of things regularly with people. And it's like without doing that, like without having a system that forces me to do that, I will forget, period, you know? And so it's like implementing those helps to correct for those things. And at a large level, now like financial transparency within a company is not always normal at like large levels, but it will be for us. But like at a large level where you don't have that transparency, you have breaches of trust, and you create opportunities because people see patterns, right? Like that's just how we're wired. We're wired to see patterns. That's why we see faces in toast, you know, like it just happens, right? Like pattern recognition is how we survive in the wilderness, you know, which is why camouflage is so effective, because it breaks up those patterns. And so it is possible to see patterns where none exist, right? And back to that mention earlier of like, you know, all those blind spots within the psyche of humanity, right? Like it is not only is it possible, but it's likely that if people don't know what's actually going on, they are going to look for a pattern and try to recreate a scenario that makes sense of the inputs of the data that they do have.
Yes.
Right. So even if they're not coming up with an accurate reflection of what's going on, they're still coming up with something that makes sense and like is reasonable. Right.
Yeah.
And so like part of my goal in knowing that like I'm hoping to grow the company and, I'm hoping that we, are able to grow and those sorts of things, which means that there just necessarily will be more distance between like me and our like entry level positions because I just can't directly know that many people. It's like with going from one shop to two, like we're going from 12 employees to 24. Right? Right? Like, it's like how do you have that many relationships? And you add another one, right? 36 people. Like you can have like passing acquaintance relationships with those people, but you can have deep, intimate relationships where people know you, right? And so it's like as those kind of things keep happening, if you don't have systems to help facilitate those transparencies and like clear out any of those issues that happen behind the scenes, you're creating opportunities for people to see things that aren't there, and that's your responsibility as a leader and as an owner, right? So like if you don't fix that, that's on you, and so like that's been for me, it's like I can see that happening. I've seen that happen to my friends' businesses. I've seen literally one of my friends lose their entire business not because that they're a bad person, but because they just didn't create these systems for communication, and it like allowed people to create these patterns and scenarios that weren't real. And it just harmed everything, so it's like if you don't do that, like that's gonna hurt you over time. And so that's been like a thing for me. It's just like if I don't create these systems for transparency, even though I'm a very transparent person and I'll happily talk to anybody about it, but if I don't actively communicate within our team and help people know about it, then that's just as good as not being transparent at all. So I have
like 100 other questions to ask you now because of what you said in the last like 5 minutes, but I'm just gonna hold it in, and I guess we'll just have to have you back. That's all.
I'm really far away, so getting me back is probably going to be very difficult.
I mean, everything you're saying about like managing your blind spots like allows you to keep moving forward and allows you to grow as a person, but also like as narrative. Narrative is growing, expanding. The Bellingham location is like coming up, and it's good. Growth is good. It's a positive trend of seeing something that is alive.
Totally.
So it's a very, very good thing. Would you say like I know personally in my life, like sometimes I push growth really, really hard, like sometimes too much. Like we play soccer on weekends. Like literally I have 2 bruises on my knee because I still think like I can go as hard as I used to. And I want to be like everybody's making fun of me because I was complaining about like my like mess ups and like wrong balls. Like why? And it's like, that's
my
not
brain
okay.
still thinks that I'm doing at this level. Like,
so in a sense, I'm like, I'm like trying too hard.
Sure is.
Like in a sense, I think that
you're washed up, Sergi.
I know. I should just stay on the
Just
sideline
phone it in, bro.
and keep. Dude, side note, I know this is a distraction, but the fact that I had the fellow cup of a geisha on the sideline, I should have just stuck to the sideline.
That's great. When you play soccer with Mirror, they show up 30 minutes before and brew pour overs for everybody.
Heck yeah, dude.
But I think just the desire of growth, like the life that it brings, is there such a thing as just pushing it too hard? And
totally.
When does growth become like toxic, if that's the thing?
Yeah, I think growth at all costs is definitely one of those things. And again, back to that humility point, right? Like knowing your limits and where you sit in the world and knowing when growing is going to be detrimental is huge, and I don't know. I am one guy. I own now 2 coffee shops. Like maybe I'm not the smartest dude in the room or whatever. And like there's a lot of like Silicon Valley wisdom that says like grow, and then sell, and then, retire on your money or put it in something else or whatever. And it's like, that's not for me. Like, that's just not who I am. I'm not interested in doing that. Like, I'm not building this company to sell. I'm building this company to create a legacy. And like, I think like Costco's style of growth is so much more inspiring to me than like, pick a tech company that's done the thing, and like, I understand that. Like, that's fine and I get it. Like, if I wasn't deeply passionate about coffee and didn't want to do this for foreseeably for the rest of my life, like I would be down to fix a problem and then try to sell that company as soon as humanly possible. Like, I get it. Like, no shade to anybody doing that, but it's just not what I'm doing for this company. So for me, like, growing is something that, like, I am not interested in doing too quickly. I'm okay with doing it when I think it makes sense, when I feel like we're in a good, healthy place to be able to facilitate and handle that, when I think that we have the team to be able to do that and, like, the crew to be able to make that happen. And also just, like, the systems in place to be able to do that, which is why we haven't expanded. Like, our business plan initially laid out to have 3 locations within 5 years and 10 within 10. And we're coming up in June, we'll hit year 5 of being open in Everett. So, you know, we're at 2, so we're a little bit behind. Obviously, there's been a pandemic in this process, right? But, like, that's a fairly manageable growth track. You know, that's not crazy. But with intention of being able to take and build systems, learn from and improve those systems, and then use those systems to grow a little bit more rapidly than we would have previously. You know, like, that's kind of the mindset there. But the reality is I'm still not willing to grow at a point where it's going to over leverage us. So, like, my growth strategy in terms of how I'm thinking about locations is sort of like this. So if I go from 1 to 2 locations and one of those locations fails, that's 50% of my business. If I have 10 locations and 1 location fails, that's 10% of my business. Right. And so, like, leverage itself is a system or a thing to keep in mind when you're growing. And, like, if you get too big for your britches, right, like, then when you fall, you have nothing to fall back on because nothing can hold you up. So that can be a thing, right? Like, growing smartly, growing thoughtfully, you know, matters, right? Totally. Like, and just being sure that, you know, you shouldn't be entirely risk averse. Like, business in general, or just anything in life that's worth doing, is going to come with some measure of risk, period. But managing your risk and being smart about it is also wise, you know. And so for me, this is my family's livelihood. Like, this is what we live off of. You know, it's like, I don't have wealthy family to, like, fall back on or anything like that, you know? So it's like, I have to be really careful about making decisions that I'm pretty sure are going to work more than I'm concerned about them working. Right. And, like, I'm not opposed to taking risk. Like, starting a business in general is a risk-based endeavor, right? Like, I've signed personal guarantees on my leases that say if my business fails, I will be personally responsible for paying these leases. You know, and there's all sorts of other risks that come with owning a business and all sorts of stuff. So, but making sure that I'm doing them where I'm pretty sure I can facilitate them better than not is important to me.
Yeah, dude, that's a great answer. That's something I mean, that's inspiring for Mark and I as, like, business owners and, like, owning a roasting company and trying to grow, but also understand what growth within means looks like. Totally. And what does growth look like for us, folks who started a roasting company in the pandemic, like 2 months before the shutdown. Like, you know what I mean? That growth in 2020 looked way different than 2021. And we're now at 2022 trying to evaluate what does growth in year 3 look like. Totally. So there's always those, like, means, but also the challenge. And both Mark and I have this personality where we are both competitive by nature, but we're also like problem solvers. Like, problems get us excited because we're like, dude, there must be a solution out there. Let's find the solution. It's like a scavenger hunt every single time. Totally. It's exciting. But I know for me, like, I've definitely experienced, like, toxic growth.
Totally.
And I think like, one of my, like, mirrors for my blind spot, like, Deja has, like, stepped up to the plate. Like, she's such an outspoken person. I'm so grateful that she's that person that she can be like, dude, you're screwing up right now. Like, this is bad. Like, and I think when that happens, like, it's hard to hear, of course. You know what I mean? Because not only hard to hear because it challenges, you know, your ego, but it's hard to hear because I want Mir to grow. I want narrative to grow. Like, I want my relationships to flourish. Like, so I understand how valuable time is. Like, but at what cost, like, will I pay for the growth of other things rather than, you know, other important things, maybe like your family, your faith community, like other elements of even hobbies. Like, you know what I mean? Like, are you willing to sacrifice, like, playing soccer on Saturdays to go roast some extra batches? I don't know, you know, stuff like that. That I think those are important questions. But dude, I love that answer. It inspires me a lot. So, dude, such a good conversation. I bet like we can keep on going forever because there's so much to talk about. And like, dude, just, man, I'm so excited to work with Narrative, to work with you, to work with the team. Yeah. Dude, it's awesome. And I'm so glad that like there's this community forming in Bellingham, like with Mir, like with Narrative, with other coffee companies in Bellingham. It's freaking excellent. Yeah. I'm like so stoked on it, dude. So
it's exciting.
Yeah, super pumped. So to wrap things up, kind of light-hearted question I want to talk about. Like, what are some like coffees you're looking forward to just in the near future, maybe some farmers that have been on your radar, producers?
Man, I think that this has been one of the most exciting times on the like green end of the spectrum. Obviously 2020, like pandemic things have made supply chains challenging, and I know you guys know that roasting is particularly challenging around that. But you know, it's like the level of innovation that's happening at the farm level in terms of flavor development is unbelievable right now. It's one of the most exciting times to be in coffee to me. Because it's like, not only do we have a better understanding of the science of like what's happening on a chemical level of when producers are doing certain things, but just the overall feedback loop is actually way stronger across the supply chain now. A lot of producers now actually will come to places where a lot of their coffees are being sold and try to taste what people are after and then produce for that in mind. Wow. And I think that's really exciting. You know, there's been like discussion about whether or not we're out of the third wave and into the fourth wave or fifth wave or new wave or whatever. And like to me, third wave has always been about flavor at the farm level. And I personally don't think we're out of the third wave yet. I think we're just maturing in it and seeing
it's very good.
The realities of that finally come to fruition. Of the work that was started in 2005 is finally really coming home to roost, and we're really getting to reap these rewards now, where coffee tastes better than it has ever tasted throughout history, period. Like, it is the best it's ever tasted right now, and that's super exciting to me. Like, I've been in coffee for, almost 10 years, and I like critically in coffee for 10 years, and I've been like actively thinking about and tasting coffee for over 10 years, and it's like I still have stuff that blows my mind. I've tasted thousands, literally you can check. I have tasted thousands and thousands of coffees, and I have data to support it, and I still get my mind blown, and that's really exciting to me. So I'm just overall excited. My favorite coffees lately have been from Diego Bermudez, and their farm at El Paraiso. They're really fun. The flavors that they're developing are really exciting to me. They're really fun. I think they're really clean and tasty. I know not everybody, people are going to have different opinions on those things, but I think they're delicious. Yeah. And so I would say probably Diego's coffees are like the most exciting to me right now, but there's so many amazing producers out there just like absolutely crushing it. And like even the fact that we just like can casually toss out producer names and we now know those people, like that is the ethos of Third Wave. That is exactly the project that we've been trying to get to for such a long time, and it's happening, and that's so rad. Yeah. It's like you can talk about Graciano Cruz or like the Petersons or, like Ida Batye, and people, if you know coffee a little bit, all those names, and that's so freaking cool to me. So I think seeing that continue to like take root and like get out to people, I think it's gonna be the most exciting thing. So anyway, Diego's coffees I'm always stoked on.
Killer.
Stoked on where everything is at right now on a coffee level. Pretty exciting times in my opinion.
Same. Dude, so good. And I'm like only starting year 5 in coffee. Yeah. Nice. So pretty stoked on it.
Heck yeah.
Dude, such a good episode. Again, thanks for coming out. I feel like for me personally, we're making like a full circle, because the first time I've ever heard of Narrative or you was a podcast.
Nice. Break
It Down podcast. Matt Carter, big shout out. So heard about that. Hollered at Mark. Mark checked out. He actually, didn't you pull up to Narrative and it wasn't open yet?
Oh, word.
Yeah, cool.
It was I found Narrative, like the address, drove up and it was like nothing there. And I'm like, cool. All right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think there have been a few people pulling up the Narrative in Bellingham that have had the same issue, because like the folks at Elizabeth Station are like, do we have people coming in? They're like, where's the coffee at? So the history continues.
From starting on one podcast, doing another, and now helping with opening Narrative Bellingham. Super stoked. So
the circles can continue to come around.
Just expanded. It's like a spiral, just another round. So super stoked. Thank you. And folks, thanks for listening again. This was a excellent episode. I hope that, one, you just got something out of it, but two, you're encouraged, you're inspired, and don't forget, folks, reflect what's good. Is that what we say at the end? Mark.
Absolutely. I think that's what you should say.
Oh,
perfect.
Max says it.
Yeah,
that's it.
You guys are reflecting what's good, so
Dude,
keep doing
let's
it.
go.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.